She found out, but it's already too late. I woke up to the sharp sound of the alarm clock cutting through the darkness of my room. It was another day on duty at the hospital, and the feeling of tiredness settled in my body like an old, unwanted friend. I looked at the clock and realized I only had 30 minutes to get ready. I got up quickly, my mind still cloudy from sleep, and went to the bathroom. As I washed my face, the cold water brought me a brief moment of clarity. "You can do it, Maya," I repeated to myself, like a mantra. After a quick shower and dressing in the light blue uniform that always reminded me of the importance of my work, I went down to the kitchen. The aroma of fresh coffee enveloped me, and I smiled, grateful for this little morning indulgence. Coffee was a ritual that I couldn't give up. It was my fuel. I picked up a mug, and as I took a sip, I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to rise above the horizon, casting golden rays over the city that never slept. New York was a vibrant metropolis, but at that moment, it seemed like a distant illusion. I knew that, in a few hours, the reality of the hospital would become chaos. The drive to work was filled with thoughts about the patients I would be caring for that day. As soon as I entered the hospital, the atmosphere was already charged with tension. People ran from one side to the other, and the screams of anxious family members echoed through the corridors. I felt part of that pulsating organism, but at the same time, a little out of place, as if I were observing everything from a fogged window. "Hi, Maya. Ready for another day?" The voice of Sarah, my colleague and friend, brought me back to reality. She had a smile on her face, but her eyes revealed the tiredness we all felt. "Hi, Sarah. Always ready, aren't you?" "Or at least trying," I replied, trying to emulate her optimism. We both knew that the routine was exhausting, but at the same time, there was a purpose that kept us firm. "Shall we go to the senior floor together later? Mr. Thompson is waiting for you," she said as she looked through the patient list on the tablet. Her heart sank when she heard his name. Mr. Thompson was a special patient, always willing to share stories of his life, and somehow became a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. "Of course. I'm looking forward to seeing you," I replied, trying to hide the anxiety that was building up inside me. He was one of those patients who brightened my day, and the simple act of talking to him always brought me a little peace. The hours passed quickly, and the shift began to pile up into a succession of calls, emergencies, and code calls. With each passing moment, I felt the pressure building. The hospital was a place where life and death danced a constant waltz, and I was at the center of this harrowing ballet. Finally, it was time to attend to Mr. Thompson. The nurse who was with him greeted me and informed me about his condition. As I entered the room, I saw Mr. Thompson lying down, a smile lighting up his wrinkled face. "Maya, I'm glad you came," he exclaimed, his voice shaking but full of joy. "Hi, Mr. Thompson. How are you feeling today?" I asked, pulling out a chair to sit next to him. You know how it is, young lady. Some days are better than others, but I always look forward to your visit. You bring a little light to this place," he said, making a sweeping gesture with his hands. I felt a wave of heat run through my body upon hearing his words. We talked about his childhood memories, his adventures around the world, and, most importantly, his family. At one point, he shared a photo of his granddaughter, and his eyes lit up with pride. "She graduated in medicine, did you know? She says she wants to be a great doctor like you," he said, winking at me. "I doubt I'm that big, but I'm glad to know she has such a beautiful role model in you," I replied, smiling. Time flew by, and the connection we formed was palpable. He was more than a patient. He was a friend. However, the hospital environment always seemed to be lurking, like an unwanted shadow. Despite the joy of that moment, I knew that reality could change in the blink of an eye. It was then that, suddenly, the alarm sounded. The piercing sound of the heart monitor echoed through the room, and the smile that had once lit up Mr. Thompson's face faded into an expression of pain and confusion. My heart raced as I rushed to adjust the equipment. "Mr. Thompson, stay with me, please. I'll take care of you," I shouted, but my voice failed me as I realized the situation was rapidly deteriorating. He began to go into cardiac arrest, and the reality of the emergency washed over me. "No, no, no," I muttered, fighting panic. The instructions I had learned from years of training began to echo in my mind, but the pressure of the moment nearly paralyzed me. Code Blue was called, and doctors arrived quickly. "Prepare for defibrillation," one of the doctors shouted, and I found myself in the midst of chaos, following commands and trying to remain calm. I felt sweat running down my forehead as time seemed to drag by. Every second was an eternity, and despair settled in my heart. Mr. Thompson was there, and I couldn't let him go. Resuscitation maneuvers continued, but there was no response. I looked at his face, and each time the beeping monitors grew fainter, a part of me shattered. And then, silence. The doctor looked at me, and his eyes said it all. Mr. Thompson no longer had vital signs. The reality of that loss hit me hard, and I was paralyzed, feeling the world around me fall apart. "I'm sorry, Maya," one of the doctors whispered as I walked away. My heart felt heavy like an anchor, and guilt began to settle in. Like a shadow I didn't know how to shake. The hospital's fluorescent light seemed colder that night. The once familiar smell of disinfectant now made me feel nauseous. The shift was at its peak, and I was running from one side to the other, trying to keep up with the frantic pace of the routine. Mr. Thompson was in my care, and he had become a comforting presence amidst the chaos. We talked often about his life, his memories, and his hopes. He had a special way of making me feel like I really made a difference. But everything changed in an instant. The alarm echoed through the halls, and my heart skipped a beat. Code Blue has been triggered. I knew this meant something was very wrong. I ran toward Mr. Thompson's room, my mind struggling to process the information as adrenaline pumped through my veins. Upon entering the room, I found the medical team already crowding around the bed. Mr. Thompson lay there, pale, his limp body surrounded by a sea of equipment that could not save him. "Start compression," one of the doctors shouted, and I immediately joined the team, my hands shaking as I tried to stay calm. Time seemed to have slowed down. I was so focused that I didn't notice the pressure of the environment, but rather the life that was fading away in front of me. "Mr. Thompson, can you hear me?" I asked, even though I knew he wouldn't answer. But somehow it helped me stay sane. "We're here. We're going to help you." And soon after, we began resuscitation maneuvers. Chest compressions were exhausting. Every push seemed to beat my soul, but I couldn't give up. Mr. Thompson had always been strong. He had this strength that radiated, and I needed to believe he was still fighting. 1, 2, 3, go Maya, you can do it, I repeated to myself as sweat ran down my forehead. After what seemed like an eternity, the Code Blue was declared over. The doctor who was leading the team took a step back, the look of defeat on his face. "I'm sorry," he said, and those words were like a blow to my stomach. I didn't want to believe what was happening. Mr. Thompson, with whom I had shared so many moments, was dead. Reality began to set in, and the guilt quickly turned into a storm inside me. The team began to disperse, but I remained there, paralyzed. My gaze fixed on Mr. Thompson's lifeless body. What did I do? I thought. I remembered the medication I had administered earlier, a dosage that now seemed wrong. I had reviewed the records many times, but the pressure and stress of the shift may have led me to make a critical error. I returned to my post, my heart heavy. The hospital was busy, but I felt completely isolated. The voices around me became an indistinct hum. My mind was spinning, and guilt was turning into a ravenous monster that devoured every rational thought I tried to have. I sat down at my desk and pulled up Mr. Thompson's records. The paper was stained with some tears that I didn't realize I had shed. I needed to do this. I needed to understand. That can't be true, I muttered to myself as I analyzed the medication. With each line I read, the weight of guilt became more unbearable. The words "wrong dose" echoed in my mind, and my stomach turned. What had I done? What could I have done differently? The feeling of despair settled over me like a tight belt, restricting my breathing. The phone rang, breaking my trance-like state. It was Sarah, my friend and fellow nurse. "Maya, are you okay? I heard about Mr. Thompson. I want to know if you need anything." I don't know, Sarah," I replied, my voice breaking. He's gone and I made a mistake. "Maya, you need to open up about this. You can't carry this burden alone," she insisted, her concern evident, but the idea of exposing what he had done, of revealing the truth, seemed impossible. What if I lose my job? What if they take away my license? What if? Maya, listen. Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control. It's not easy, but you can't blame yourself like that. The hospital has policies for these types of situations. You need to be honest about what happened. Honest. I was filled with nervous laughter. Honest is what I can't be, Sarah. What I did is unforgivable. As soon as I hung up, Sarah's words resonated in my mind. But the fear of losing everything paralyzed me. I didn't know how to deal with the guilt that consumed me, and so, in a moment of desperation, I decided to hide the mistake. The idea of being exposed, of being held responsible for Mr. Thompson's death, was a burden I could not bear. The pain of losing a patient was already a mountain I didn't know how to climb. That night, sleep didn't come. The patients' faces flashed through my mind, an endless parade of faces that became blurs in the darkness. And among these faces, Mr. Thompson stood out, his eyes staring at me with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. I couldn't escape the weight of the truth, the reality of what I had done. The hours dragged by, and the guilt turned into something tangible, a shadow that crouched beside me, whispering that I had failed. The next morning, I decided I needed to understand what really happened. It was time to investigate. This became an obsession. I started reviewing each patient's records, trying to find something that would justify my error. But the more I looked, the more I got lost in a maze of uncertainty. As I went through the papers, I realized that Alex, a staff nurse who had worked alongside me, was present during the incident. He seemed to know more than he was willing to say. His expression in the emergency room during Code Blue, a mix of tension and guilt, wouldn't leave me alone. It was time to confront him. If anyone understood the gravity of the situation, it was him. The day passed slowly until I found a moment alone with Alex. He was in a break room, looking at the floor, deep in thought. "Alex," I called, my voice hesitant. He raised his head, and his eyes revealed a deep weariness. "We can talk?" He hesitated, but nodded. "Of course, Maya. What's going on?" "About Mr. Thompson. I need to know what you saw. What really happened that night?" The tension in the air was palpable. I needed answers, but I also feared what he would say. I don't know if this is the right time for this," he murmured, avoiding my gaze. "We all did our best. But what if our best wasn't enough? What if I made a mistake, Alex? I can't live with that. I need to understand what happened." The anguish in my voice was undeniable. He looked distraught, his hands shaking slightly. "Look, Maya, we're all human. Mistakes happen," he said, his voice a whisper. But the way he spoke made me feel like there was something more. "You can't blame yourself alone. You were there. You know what happened. I need to know if you saw something. If you know something that can help me." Frustration built up in my chest, and anxiety made me want to scream. He took a deep breath, as if fighting an internal storm. I made a mistake before. A wrong dosage on a patient. But it's not the same, Maya. We can't stay stuck with what's already happened. But that might have been what happened to Mr. Thompson. You were under pressure, just like me. What aren't you telling me? It was different for me. He trailed off, his voice trailing off. "I was in a complicated situation, but I can't be responsible for that. We can't just shift the blame onto each other." The tension between us was electric, and his words weighed like an anchor on my heart. "Why are you dodging? What's the truth, Alex?" He looked at me, and the frustration in his eyes mixed with a deep sadness. "Because the truth is hard, Maya. Sometimes the blame is shared, but we are not the ones who have to bear it." Guilt began to manifest itself in me in ways I never imagined possible. Every night, when I closed my eyes, the image of Mr. Thompson haunted me. I saw his serene and kind face, that smile he always offered me when I entered his room. But now, that smile turned into an expression of pain and disappointment. "Maya, couldn't you save me?" he whispered in my dreams, and I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, my breathing labored. The next day, my longtime friend, Ethan, noticed that I wasn't feeling well. He was always a constant presence at the hospital, an experienced nurse who knew when something was wrong. "You look pale, Maya. Everything is fine?" he asked as I organized the materials in the infirmary. "Just tired, Ethan. The shifts have been long," I replied, trying to hide the storm that was brewing inside me. He watched me for a moment, concern reflected in his eyes. "Tired is one thing, but you look different. If you need someone to talk to, you know where to find me, right?" I nodded my thanks, but I knew I couldn't talk to him. Guilt isolated me. When I returned home, the feeling of being trapped in a nightmare intensified. I could not escape the memory of those hours when Mr. Thompson fought against death, and I was helpless, paralyzed by my own inability. Later, while I was trying to distract myself by watching a movie, my friend Sarah called me. "Maya, I'm worried about you. He hasn't shown up for meetings. What is happening?" His voice was sweet, but there was a serious tone that didn't go unnoticed. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just busy," I replied, but my voice cracked, betraying the truth I was trying to hide. "You're not okay, and you know it. Shall we go out and have a coffee?" "I can help you," she insisted. I hesitated. The idea of opening my heart to someone seemed scary, but at the same time, the pressure was building. It was as if I were carrying a huge weight on my shoulders, and the possibility of sharing that burden was tempting. "Okay, let's meet later." The cafe was full, the strong aroma of roasting beans mixed with the low murmur of conversation. At the table, Sarah watched me closely as I stirred the cup. "Maya, I know you are struggling with something. You can tell me," she said, her voice soft. I sighed deeply, the weight of guilt almost suffocating me. "It's about Mr. Thompson." The mention of the name made my stomach turn. He didn't survive. And I made a mistake. Sarah frowned. "A mistake? What do you mean?" I looked down, embarrassed. "I administered the wrong dosage, Sarah. He needed medication, and I just didn't think. And now he's dead. I feel like I could have done more, that if I had paid more attention, he would still be here." Sarah's gaze softened, and she reached out to touch mine. "Maya, we all make mistakes. You can't carry this alone. You need to open up and tell the truth. What if it costs me my career?" "I'm going to lose everything," I said, voice shaking. "If I tell you, I will become the nurse who killed a patient. I can't do that." "But what if you don't tell and it ends up eating you up? Think about how you feel right now. Guilt will destroy you, and you know it," Sarah insisted. "Would it be true?" The idea of living with this guilt seemed unbearable, but the idea of exposing myself sounded even more terrifying. "I don't know what to do, Sarah. I just want this to end," I mumbled. In those days that followed, guilt became a constant shadow, always at my side. I couldn't concentrate on work, and every time I saw Alex, a knot formed in my stomach. He was there, working as if nothing had happened, and that made me even more confused. "Don't you feel bad? Don't you feel responsible?" I wanted to scream at him, but the words never came. It was then that I decided to investigate. I needed to know what really happened. I reviewed hospital records, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. I found notes about Mr. Thompson that I didn't remember taking, and, in the midst of that, I realized that there was something strange about the medication schedule. My heart raced at the thought of Alex being present during the administration of the medication. Why didn't he say anything? I whispered to myself as I flipped through the pages. Unease rose in my chest, and a need to confront him began to form. The next morning, I met Alex in the cafeteria. He was sitting alone, looking at his cell phone. With my heart racing, I approached. "Alex, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm, but his heart beating out of control. He looked up, surprised. "Of course, Maya. About what?" "About Mr. Thompson," I replied, sitting down opposite him. He immediately closed in, his shoulders tensing. "I was there when it all happened. You saw what happened, didn't you?" "That's not easy to say, Maya," Alex began, but I wasn't about to let him shy away. "Can you help me understand what happened?" I can't handle this alone," I said, sincerity in my voice. He hesitated, looking around, as if looking for a way out. "Look, it was a complicated situation. We were all under pressure, and it was a mistake. He trailed off, the expression of guilt on his face evident. But what was he hiding? A mistake? What do you mean by that? I asked, voice louder than I intended. Alex sighed, running a hand over his face. I made a mistake before, and maybe I got carried away. The pressure, Maya, it's unbearable sometimes. But this isn't about me. Mr. Thompson, he hesitated again, and I realized he was hiding something much bigger. Alex, please be honest. What happened that night? My voice came out almost like a cry for help. He looked down, and the tension in the room seemed to increase. I don't know if I can talk about this. It's not just about me, and you are also in a delicate situation. I need the truth. I shouted, unable to contain my frustration. If you know something that can help me, don't leave me in the dark. This is killing me. The desperation in my voice was palpable. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw an internal struggle. He is well, but you need to understand that the truth can be painful. I was under pressure and perhaps manipulated the dosage, but it wasn't intentional, Maya. I didn't want that to happen. His words were like a blow to my stomach. You did what? Reality began to crumble around me, and the guilt I carried turned into something more complex and disturbing. I didn't want him to die, I swear, but I was so stressed and I didn't know what to do. The pressure was too much, he murmured, voice barely audible. At that moment, the confusion turned into a whirlwind of emotions. It wasn't just my fault, but Alex's fault too. The weight became unbearable. And now? What are we going to do with this? My voice was a whisper. He looked at me, the expression of despair and frustration evident on his face. I don't know, Maya. I don't know how we can deal with this. And there we were, two nurses lost in a sea of guilt and darkness, not knowing what the next step was to take. Sitting in one of the chairs in the break room, I watched Alex from across the table. He was deep in thought, his eyes fixed on the dirty floor, as if the worn linoleum was more interesting than what was about to happen. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and the tension between us was palpable. I knew I needed to speak, but each word felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. Alex, I began, voice coming out quieter than I expected. He looked up, and I could see surprise mixed with slight fear. We need to talk about what happened to Mr. Thompson. He swallowed hard, and the silence that followed seemed to drag on, stretching like a rubber band about to snap. Maya, I don't know if now is the best time, he murmured, avoiding my gaze. The evasiveness in his voice made my heart race. I knew he had something to hide, something that could change everything. No, Alex, we need to do this now. I can't carry this alone, I insisted, determination starting to seep into my voice. I got up from the chair and walked over to him, stopping a few steps away. You were there. You know what happened. Why are you trying to run away from the truth? He sighed, and I could see the internal struggle on his face. Maya, you don't understand. I was under pressure, and things, they happened so fast. He looked at the ground again, as if the words he was about to say were too heavy to say out loud. I didn't want that to happen. I really didn't. But it happened, Alex. Mr. Thompson died, and I made a mistake. A mistake that you may have also contributed to. If you don't tell me the truth, it's going to keep eating at me, I said, to voice shaking as guilt and frustration began to boil over. We need to be honest. We can't let this become a weight that destroys us. He finally looked at me, eyes filled with a mix of anguish and shame. I didn't want you to be like this. I didn't know you were so shaken up. I thought you had everything under control. I had no control over anything. I was so focused on saving Mr. Thompson that I didn't notice what was happening around me. And now, this guilt is consuming me. I confessed, feeling tears threatening. Escape. If you know something that can help me, please tell me. Alex bit his lower lip, hesitating. I made a mistake before, a dosing error. Something I should never have done, and it haunts me to this day. But it wasn't what caused Mr. Thompson's death. I can't be the one to carry this guilt, Maya. You were there too. What you did could have influenced the situation. We need to be transparent about what happened, Alex. We can't just let this go by like nothing happened, I said, the urgency in my voice growing. If we don't speak out now, it will slowly destroy us. He stood up and began pacing back and forth, his hands clasping together nervously. I was under pressure, and it affected my judgment. I shouldn't have risked that medication, but I was so focused on helping that I didn't realize that I might be doing more harm than good. Are you telling me you adjusted the dosage without telling me? I almost screamed, frustration boiling over. You had no right to do that. It was a matter of life and death. I know, but everything was so chaotic. I just wanted to help, Maya. He looked desperate, and I could see the guilt was eating away at him as much as it was at me. I didn't want you to feel that way. I didn't want that to happen. But it happened, Alex. I screamed, the anger and pain finally exploding. And now we're here, in a break room, discussing this like it's just another mistake. A mistake that cost a man his life. You need to understand that it's not just about us. It's about the consequences our actions have. He stopped, eyes wide. Maya, I didn't know you were so shaken. I thought you were just dealing with it. But now I see you're broken. I didn't want this to happen. I'm not broken because you told me you lied, Alex. I'm broken because you left me in the dark. You let me carry this weight alone, and I can't do that. We need to be honest. We need to face this together. I don't know if I can do this. If I speak out, everything could change. My career, yours. It's all so complicated, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. What if it destroys everything? If we don't talk, what will be left for us? Just guilt and pain. I can't live like this, Alex. I took a deep breath, trying to gather the right words. We need to find a way to deal with this. Together. We can't let this lie consume us. His expression softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a spark of understanding in his eyes. You're right. I can't live with this anymore. But I'm afraid, Maya. I'm afraid too. But the truth needs to come out. Mr. Thompson deserves this. We deserve this. We can't let guilt define us, I said, feeling like we had finally reached a point of understanding. He nodded slowly, determination beginning to form in his gaze. So let's talk. Let's hold ourselves accountable. For Mr. Thompson's sake and for our own sake. With that, a wave of relief and fear mixed in my chest. We knew that the truth was the only path, but we also knew that this path was full of uncertainty. I didn't know what would happen next, but I finally felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. I feel a growing pressure in my chest, as if someone is squeezing me with all their strength. The weight of guilt is unbearable, a shadow that follows me into every corner of the hospital. What did I do? What did I omit? As I walk through the halls, the whispers of colleagues seem to echo in my mind, mixed with Mr. Thompson's lament. He calls out to me, his voice a distant but clear whisper. Maya, you need to do the right thing. The thought torments me. That night, I was lying in bed, looking at the ceiling without really seeing. The soft light from the lamp illuminated the room, but the darkness inside me seemed impenetrable. The phone vibrates next to me. It's Sarah. She realized that something is not right. Hi, Maya. How are you? Her voice is soft, but there is an underlying concern. Hi. I'm fine, just a little tired. You know how it is, I reply, trying to avoid the truth. Tired? Yes. But you look different. Everything is fine? She insists, and I feel the lump in my throat tighten even more. It's just work. You know how it is, I say, trying to change the subject. Yeah, I know, but you can tell me if you need to. I'm here for you. The sincerity in your voice touches me, but I can't open the game. The idea of sharing my burden seems impossible. Thank you, Sarah, but really, I just need time to process everything. I hang up the phone and sink into thoughts. The image of Mr. Thompson becomes vivid in my mind, his gentle smile and the look of trust in his eyes. I feel the heat of tears building up. What did I do? Guilt is a chain that binds me, and each memory of the mistake drags me deeper. The next morning, the hospital is once again immersed in chaos. The smell of disinfectant and the bustle of people create a suffocating environment. As I walk to the infirmary, I notice Alex in the distance. He's talking to a doctor, but when our eyes meet, a wave of discomfort shoots through my body. What does he know? Doubt consumes me, and I wonder if he's thinking about what happened. Maya, he calls, approaching. Are you well? I'm just thinking about some things. My voice is hesitant, and I feel fragile, as if any word could break the fragile balance I maintain. Look, about what happened with Mr. Thompson. He starts, but I interrupt him. Alex, we don't need to talk about this. We need it, Maya. The anguish in his voice is palpable. I feel guilty too. I stop, looking at him. He looks as lost as I feel, and that offers me a strange comfort. Are you guilty? Disbelief is reflected in my tone. You weren't the one who administered the wrong medication, but I was there. It could have helped more. The sincerity in your eyes is touching, but it also irritates me. He has no idea what I actually did or didn't do. What do you mean by that? I question, my frustration growing. It's not easy for anyone. The environment here can be so oppressive, and we all make mistakes. He shakes his head, as if trying to convince himself. The tension between us is palpable. I am consumed by doubt. Should I trust him? The idea of sharing my guilt is terrifying, but it also seems like the only way to alleviate some of the weight I carry. Did you make a mistake? I ask, hesitantly. Alex, you need to be honest with me. He hesitates, his eyes darting away. A charged silence settles between us. Finally, he speaks, but his voice is low. It was a small mistake, but he takes a deep breath. What I did may have contributed to the situation. What did you do? I can't believe what I'm hearing. The idea that there is more at stake than I knew makes me uneasy. I didn't control the situation as I should have. And yes, I was under pressure. That day was chaotic, and he seems to struggle with his words. I didn't want anyone to get hurt, but some things got out of my control. My thoughts spin. His every word becomes an echo in my mind. It's like a new weight has been added to my guilt. I realize that the situation is more complicated than I thought, and the idea of exposing Alex distresses me. So, you're saying that? My voice trails off. If I do this, if I talk, I could ruin your career too. I don't want you to carry this as a burden alone. But, Maya, the truth needs to come out. He seems sincere, but the doubt persists. What does he really want? What if the truth destroys us? What if I end up losing everything because of this? My voice turns into a whisper, filled with fear. Sometimes the only way to heal is to face the pain. Alex responds, and I realize he really believes it. But what if I can't deal with the consequences? He approaches, and his proximity causes a whirlwind of emotions in me. The stakes are much bigger than our careers. It's Mr. Thompson's life, the trust he placed in me. The thought of carrying this guilt alone while he hides behind a defense makes me furious. I don't know if I can, Alex. I confess, my voice shaking. What if I expose you and you're not the only one to blame? He hesitates, and the air between us becomes heavy. Maya, guilt is a monster that feeds on silence. He says, and I feel a chill down my spine. You need to decide what is more important, your career or the truth. His words echo in my mind. I know he's right, but the thought of losing everything I've built terrifies me. Guilt turns into an internal battle, and the echoes of what happened to Mr. Thompson continue to haunt me. I don't know what to do, Alex. I say finally, feeling the tears run down my face. He watches me, and in his gaze, I see a reflection of my own pain. And for a moment, I feel like I'm not alone in this fight. You need to listen to your heart, Maya. He speaks softly, and I can tell he's trying to support me, but the final decision is mine. And so I remain, trapped between the choice to free myself and the possibility of losing everything. The pressure on my chest intensifies, and the battle is far from over. Sitting at the small table in the break room, with a notebook in hand, I tried to organize my thoughts. The pen trembled between my fingers, as if it had a life of its own, reluctant to touch the paper. The fluorescent light above me pulsed, creating an oppressive environment that seemed to reflect my emotional state. The pressure in my chest increased by the second, and the memory of Mr. Thompson wouldn't leave me alone. Every line I tried to write became a maze of guilt and despair. You can't concentrate, can you? Sarah's voice echoed in the room, and I glanced at her sideways. She was leaning against the door, her face worried and her arms crossed. I'm trying, I replied, my voice sounding weaker than I'd like. I need to understand what happened. Sarah walked over to me and sat in the opposite chair. Maya, you don't have to carry this alone. Talking about it can help. To speak? About what? I was irritated, and the frustration showed in my voice. About how I made a mistake that cost a patient his life. How can I just talk about this? She sighed, understanding that I was on the verge of a breakdown. I'm not saying it will be easy, but hiding the truth will only hurt you more. You need to face it. What if I don't know how? The question slipped from my lips before I could think. What if the truth destroys me? Sometimes the truth is the only thing that can set you free, Sarah replied, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. Think about what happened to Mr. Thompson. You did what you could. Now we need to understand what went wrong and why. Hearing his words, my mind started to wander. My thoughts became a whirlwind, and memories of the fateful day were mixed with flashes of guilt and panic. The image of Mr. Thompson, with his gentle smile and hopeful gaze, haunted me like a shadow. I could have done more, I murmured, my voice full of pain. I should have noticed the error in the dosage. If I had checked, what if you had checked? Sarah interrupted, her expression firm. You are not a robot, Maya. We all make mistakes. Even Alex, even the entire team. The important thing now is to understand, not torture yourself. But what if Alex knows more than he's letting on? What if he's hiding something? I asked, anxiety growing. Alex had always been a constant presence, but now he was a mystery shrouded in secrets. Then you need to find out the truth. But that doesn't mean you have to bear the blame alone, Sarah said calmly. You've done this too long. Her words echoed in my mind. The idea of confronting Alex was forming, but fear paralyzed me. What would I say to him? How could I question a colleague I somehow trusted? I don't know if I can, I confessed, looking at the blank notebook in front of me. Every time I think about talking to him, my heart skips a beat. What if he doesn't tell me the truth? You'll never know if you don't try. And if he's hiding something, you need to know. For your peace of mind and for Mr. Thompson's memory, Sarah insisted, her voice soft but firm. Maybe I should write down everything that happened, I muttered, more to myself than to her, trying to compose a timeline, something that makes sense. Yes, do it, Sarah encouraged, and I picked up the pen again. The words began to flow slowly as I wrote about the fateful day, interactions with Mr. Thompson, and even the moment the code blue was triggered. Each word was a weight I tried to lift from my shoulders, but the truth seemed to slip through my fingers. Later, during a new shift, another critical situation unfolded. A patient went into serious condition, and my mind was immediately pulled back to the day I lost Mr. Thompson. The smell of disinfectant and the sound of heart monitors seemed to paralyze me. My heart accelerated. Memories began to mix with reality. Mr. Thompson's face loomed large in my mind, and I felt caught between the past and the present. We need you here, Maya. A doctor's voice brought me back to reality. I looked at the patient in question, the machines beeping and the people around me moving quickly. Panic started to set in again, and I felt sweat running down my forehead. Sorry, I'm here, I mumbled, trying to focus. But as I tried to concentrate, Mr. Thompson's image kept coming up, reminding me of what had happened. What could I have done? What could I have changed? After that service, I returned to the break room, exhausted. The notebook was in a pile of papers, but I knew I needed to get back to it. The truth was there, waiting to be discovered. But how could I find her if my mind was so confused? I picked up the notebook and started writing again, but the words seemed to slip from my mind. The fear of facing the truth paralyzed me. I needed a boost. Okay, Maya, you need to do this, I said to myself in a whisper. If not now, when? The pressure was building inside me, and I knew it was time to act. I needed to free myself from this weight that oppressed me. The truth needed to be revealed. And if Alex had anything to do with this, I couldn't keep quiet. I took a deep breath and prepared myself for what was to come. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew that if I dared to take the first step, perhaps I could find the peace I so desperately sought. The room was charged with tension. The air felt thicker, as if each of us were breathing in an invisible burden. I sat in one of the chairs on the left, hands clasped in my lap, trying not to let my heart race any further. The gaze of all colleagues was fixed on the supervisors, who were talking in whispers, as if the weight of reality had settled between us. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my ears, a deafening sound amid the nervous silence that dominated the room. When the meeting finally began, the senior supervisor, Dr. Almeida, looked me straight in the eyes. I could feel the weight of his gauze, a mixture of worry and expectation. "Maya, you are here because we need to discuss the incident involving Mr. Thompson. We know you were directly involved. How do you feel about what happened?" Those words cut like a knife. I don't know, Dr. Almeida. Guilt consumes me. I did everything I could. My voice trailed off, and I paused, trying to gather my courage. What I really wanted to say was that I hadn't done enough, that I was carrying an unbearable weight. I looked at Alex, who was sitting on the other side of the room. He looked pale, with an expression that mixed fear and despair. I couldn't read what he was thinking, but I sensed that he was also aware of the underground hubbub that surrounded us. "We need to be transparent about what happened that night," Dr. Almeida continued, breaking the silence. "The team needs to understand that mistakes happen, but the only way to learn from them is through honesty." He looked at me again. "Maya, can you share your version of events?" A chill ran down my spine. I knew I should speak up, but the thought of exposing Alex paralyzed me. He had been my colleague, my ally during those endless shifts. But the memory of Mr. Thompson, of his hopeful look and then his death, hit me with a devastating force. I administered the wrong medication. I began, my voice shaking. I was under pressure, and I made a mistake. "What was the dosage you administered?" asked a staff nurse, concern evident in her voice. I didn't check the information properly," I replied, choking back a sob. "It was a critical mistake, and I know it. He didn't deserve this." Tears began to stream down my face, but I couldn't afford to let the pain overcome me. I needed to be strong. I needed to be honest. I should have checked twice. Mr. Thompson, he trusted me. A murmur ran through the room. I looked at Alex again and saw how he squirmed in his seat. He couldn't look me in the eyes. "Maya, you're not alone in this," he finally said, his voice low but firm. The pressure was on for all of us. I also made mistakes during resuscitation." "No, Alex, it's not the same," I replied, frustration rising to the surface. "I made a mistake when administering the medication. You can't downplay it." The indignation in my voice echoed in the room, and I noticed that some colleagues were looking between us, perplexed. Dr. Almeida tried to intervene. "Maya, let's stay focused. Alex, you were there. What can you tell us about what happened during resuscitation?" Alex hesitated, and I could feel the sweat running down my forehead. I was there, but the situation escalated quickly. Mr. Thompson, he was in critical condition, and we were all under pressure. I didn't do enough to help. I couldn't stabilize him, he said, his voice cracking. "But it's important for you to know that it wasn't just you. We were all fighting against time." "But you were there, Alex," I said, almost pleading. "You had a duty to support me, to make sure everything was done correctly. And yet, you did something that complicated the situation even more." The room fell silent, and I realized that the words I spoke were more than just an outburst. They were a truth I needed to face. "That's not fair, Maya," Alex protested, looking at the floor. "I didn't want that to happen. The pressure was unbearable for all of us. What do you want me to say? That I'm to blame? That I'm a monster?" His voice was full of emotion, and I could see him fighting the tide of his own guilt. "This isn't about pointing fingers, Alex," I said, trying to remain calm. "It's about understanding what happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. A patient has died, and we need to take responsibility. We need to remember that behind every mistake, there is a life that was affected. What matters now is the truth." Dr. Almeida watched the exchange carefully and then spoke. "What we're trying to do here is create an environment where we can learn and grow. We are all human and, as such, we are susceptible to errors. The important thing is that, in the end, we can come together to ensure the safety of our patients." "But what if that means someone needs to be held accountable?" a nurse questioned, concern evident in her gaze. How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? I took a deep breath, the reality of what was happening settling in me. The responsibility is shared. We need to talk about this openly. And if I have to be the first to take that step, then so be it. The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at Alex again, and he seemed to be struggling with something inside him. His look was a mix of anger and pain. "Maya, please," he murmured. "Don't do that. Don't put it all on yourself." "Someone needs to tell the truth, Alex," I replied, determination beginning to build within me. We cannot hide behind blame. We cannot allow fear to control us. Dr. Almeida then said, "What you are proposing, Maya, is a courageous step. If you are willing to face the consequences, it speaks volumes about your integrity. But remember, the truth can be a double-edged sword." I felt my heart race. I knew that moment was a turning point. The words I was about to say could change everything. I looked around the room, meeting the gazes of my classmates, some full of support, others full of doubt. And in that instant, I realized that the truth I was seeking was not just about me, but about all of us. The responsibility was collective, and it was time to face it. The break room was lit by dim fluorescent light, and the silence seemed deafening. I was sitting at the table, my hands shaking next to the notebook where I started to write everything down. The words danced in my mind, but I couldn't organize them. The weight of what I had done and what I still needed to do was almost unbearable. I looked at Sarah, who was sitting across from me, her worried expression reflecting the internal storm I was feeling. "Maya, are you still thinking about this?" she asked, her voice soft and encouraging, but I could feel the tension in her words. "You know you need to tell the truth." "I know, but what if it costs me my career? What if no one believes me?" Insecurity shattered my confidence with every passing second. Mr. Thompson's face, his look full of hope and sadness, seemed to haunt me. "You have to do this, Maya. It's the only way to free yourself. And if you don't talk now, this guilt will never go away," Sarah insisted, and I could see the determination in her eyes. She always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to find a spark of courage. "Do you think they will listen to me? That they will understand that I am not a criminal, that this was all a mistake? It doesn't matter how you feel right now. What matters is that you are a dedicated professional and you made a mistake under pressure. They need to know the truth, and so do you," Sarah said, taking my hand in hers. "Let's go together. I'm here with you." I was a little encouraged by his words, but the idea of facing the hospital's ethics department still paralyzed me. It was as if a wave of cold ran through my veins. What about Alex? What if he tries to discredit me? He knows my mistake. He was there. He may try, but the truth always prevails. "Don't let his fear control you," Sarah reminded me, and I took a deep breath, feeling courage begin to blossom in me. "You're right. I need to do this. For Mr. Thompson. For myself," I murmured, feeling a wave of determination emerge. I stood up, and adrenaline started flowing through my body. I didn't want to be a hostage to my guilt anymore. "Come on then," Sarah said, standing up and adjusting her blouse, as if preparing for battle. We left the break room, each step bringing a mix of fear and relief. The hospital was in a constant frenzy, with nurses running from one side to the other, and the sound of monitors echoing through the hallways. As we walked, the weight of the truth felt more and more real. I wondered if I could handle the pressure of exposing what had happened. But the more I thought about Mr. Thompson and what he meant to me, the more steadfast I became. We arrived at the door of the ethics department, and I hesitated for a moment. "Sarah, what if they don't listen to me? What if everything ends badly?" I was on the verge of a breakdown. "You've already been through so much, Maya. This is just one more step. Remember what you said. You need to do this for yourself and for Mr. Thompson," she replied, and her steady gaze gave me a boost. "You're right. I can't live like this anymore." I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The environment was austere, with white walls and a long table where several supervisors sat. They looked up when we entered, and the atmosphere became tense and heavy. I felt my heart racing, and the sound of my breathing seemed deafening. "Good afternoon," began one of the supervisors, his gaze serious and appraising. What do you ladies want? I felt my voice waver. I need to talk about what happened with Mr. Thompson, I managed, my voice shaking. The silence in the room was palpable, and the eyes were fixed on me. Continue, urged a woman with a clipboard in hand, and I realized there was no turning back. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. I'm a nurse at this hospital, and during my shift, Mr. Thompson suffered a cardiac arrest. I made a mistake in the dosage of medication I administered to him, I said, the truth finally escaping my lips, feeling the weight of words like an anchor. Are you saying there was a mistake? One of the supervisors questioned, his gaze focused and intense. Yes, and it wasn't just a mistake. I was under pressure, and I didn't properly review the records, I continued, voice strengthening. I can't change what happened, but I need you to know the truth. I can't live with this guilt anymore. The room was silent, the tension almost unbearable. I looked at Sarah, who was silently encouraging me. And I'm not just here to confess my mistake. I also want to talk about Alex. He was present and I think he also made a mistake. He was under pressure and may have manipulated the dosage. The reactions in the room were immediate. The supervisors began to whisper among themselves, and I felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. That's a serious accusation, said one of them, looking at me with an expression that mixed skepticism and concern. I know it's serious, but I can't stay silent. The truth needs to be told. I don't want the mistake I made to be repeated with other patients, I said, my voice now firmer. And I don't want Alex to foot the bill alone for something that was a team error. The atmosphere was charged, and I could feel the pressure building. I looked at the supervisors, hoping they understood the gravity of the situation. Please, not just for me, but for all the nurses and patients who depend on us, I begged, my voice barely above a whisper. You understand this could have consequences for you, don't you? A supervisor asked, her expression serious. Yes, I understand, but I need to do this. For Mr. Thompson. For all of us, I replied, my determination growing with each word. At this moment, I realized that I had finally found my voice. I was no longer just running from a mistake. I was facing him head-on, and it gave me a sense of freedom that I hadn't expected to feel again. The air in the room was heavy, almost oppressive, as I looked around, taking in the faces of my coworkers. The tension was palpable, and the silence felt like screaming. We were all gathered in the hospital conference room, an assembly of healthcare professionals who, at some point, swore to protect and save lives. But now, we were just shadows of an error that hung in the air like a black cloud, about to collapse. My heart was racing, and I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins. Alex was there, a few meters away from me. His expression was a mix of nervousness and despair. He looked at me with a look on his face that I couldn't decipher, but that made me feel a lump in my throat. What I was about to do could change everything. Not just for me, but for him too. And in a way, for Mr. Thompson, who was now just a tragic memory in our lives. The supervisor began to speak, his serious tone reverberating in the room. We are here to discuss the incident involving Mr. Thompson. We need to understand what really happened that night. The safety of our patients is our top priority. I knew he meant me and Alex, and the weight of responsibility seemed to crush me. I don't know what happened, Alex said, breaking the silence, his voice shaking. I was there, but I didn't mean to. I didn't know you had given the wrong medication. He gave me a look that mixed panic and guilt. I didn't know anything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was trying to separate himself from his part in the tragedy, and that made me even more uneasy. The truth was on the edge of my tongue, but fear paralyzed me. What I was about to say would not only incriminate him, but also put me in a vulnerable position. I was about to expose us all. We need to be honest, I interjected, my voice firmer than I actually felt. We cannot continue with this lie. Mr. Thompson, he deserves the truth. I looked into Alex's eyes, trying to convey the urgency of the situation. It cannot just be another number in a statistic. We owe it to him, and ourselves. You don't know what you're saying, Maya, he replied, his voice now louder, almost desperate. If you tell this, you will be risking everything. Your career, your license, and even our friendship. He was beginning to panic, and I realized that it wasn't just fear for himself that was driving him, but also the weight of guilt he carried. And what do you suggest? That we continue to hide the truth? That we let guilt consume us? I could feel my patience slipping away. Do you remember what Mr. Thompson told me? He wanted me to fight for his life. And I couldn't. I can't live with this. I can't. I was almost in tears, emotion overflowing. The room was silent. All eyes were now fixed on us. I could feel the pressure building, as if everyone was waiting for me to say something more. And at that moment, I realized there was no going back. It was now or never. I'm not a criminal, Alex, I said, voice shaking. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but that doesn't make me a bad nurse. It doesn't make me a villain. And you made mistakes too. We need to be honest about this. Alex seemed to be struggling internally. He looked at the floor, fingers twitching nervously. I did it because I was under pressure, Maya. It wasn't just you. It was the shift, the workload. I couldn't think clearly, but that doesn't justify what happened. I didn't want that to happen, and I didn't want you to hide the truth from me. I said, my voice rising. You could have told me. You could have stopped me. And now here we are, in a room full of people, discussing a mistake that could have been avoided. The supervisor interrupted, with a stern look. Guys, let's remain calm. We need clarity here. If there is more information, it is vital that it is presented. Transparency is essential so that we can prevent this from happening again. His gaze hit me like lightning. It was now or never. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the truth on my back. I administered the wrong dosage. I was wrong. And Alex was there, but he didn't stop me. I'm not here to blame anyone, but we need to be honest about what happened. Silence fell again, and I could feel everyone's eyes turning to Alex. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. He took a deep breath, and I knew he was waiting for the right moment to speak. I didn't do anything to stop it, and I knew something was wrong. I should have acted, but I didn't. The pressure was immense, and I let it get to me. I could feel the relief and pain mixing in me. We were finally revealing the truth, but the feeling of betrayal and guilt still hung in the air. Alex, in an act of desperation, tried to deflect the blame, but the confession was there, exposed, in front of everyone. That doesn't help us, the supervisor said, his voice firm. We need to focus on the actions we will take from now on. What happened was tragic, but we need to learn from it. Maya, Alex, I appreciate your honesty. Truth is the first step to healing. His words echoed in my mind. The first step towards healing. I knew that no matter what happened next, I could no longer live in the shadow of guilt. The truth was out in the open, and somehow that brought me a slight sense of relief, even though my future was uncertain. The room was still silent, and I looked into Alex's eyes once again. He looked defeated, but there was a flash of understanding in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Maya, he whispered, barely audible. Me too, I replied, my voice breaking, but we need to move on. For us, and for Mr. Thompson. The meeting room is cold and austere, with gray walls that seem to absorb the light. I sit at the table, staring at the floor, as if he could give me some comfort. The hospital directors are sitting in front of me, their expressions a mix of seriousness and disappointment. The sound of the clock on the wall echoes like a drum, marking the time that seems to have stopped since the fateful day. Mississippi Maya, begins Dr. Thompson, the hospital's chief ethicist, his deep voice reverberating in the room. We have carefully reviewed his case and the circumstances leading to Mr. Thompson's death. I swallow hard, feeling the bitter taste of guilt rising in my throat. His name, Mr. Thompson, resonates like an echo in my mind. I understand. I manage to mumble, but the truth is that nothing can prepare me for what's to come. Unfortunately, he continues, your decision to hide the error in medication dosing cannot be ignored. Ethics and professional responsibility are fundamental in our practice. With that said, we have decided that your license will be suspended indefinitely. His words cut like a sharp blade. A lump forms in my throat, and my heart seems to stop for a moment. But I did it because I was scared. I didn't want to lose my job, my career. The words come out of me like despair. an attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Dr. Lisa, another board member, crosses her arms, her expression understanding but firm. Maya, we all understand the pressure you face daily. However, this does not justify hiding an error that cost a life. Each of us here has been through difficult situations, but transparency is crucial. What about Alex? I ask, anger starting to mix with pain. He was there too. He also made a mistake. The mention of his name makes my blood boil. The betrayal I felt when I saw him try to blame me still burns in my veins. Dr. Thompson shakes his head. Alex's situation will be handled separately. What we need to discuss now is you and your actions. The hospital needs to ensure the safety of all patients, and this includes having professionals who can be held accountable for their decisions. I look at the table, trying to process his words. Mr. Thompson, the elderly patient who told me stories about his youth, is now gone because of me. And now, I am responsible for this. The feeling of helplessness and regret is overwhelming. Please give me a second chance, I beg, voice shaking. I never wanted this to happen. I'm willing to do anything to make this right. Unfortunately, Maya, we can't ignore the facts, says Dr. Thompson, his gaze serious. What happened is not just an isolated failure. Your decision to hide the error is a serious breach of trust. We need professionals who prioritize patient safety above all else. The tears start to slide down my face. I don't know how to live with this. I confess, the pain overflowing. Mr. Thompson, he saw me as a friend and I failed him. The room remains silent, and I can feel the weight of the director's gaze on me. The truth is, you need time to reflect on your actions, says Dr. Lisa, softening her expression a little. We hope you can use this time to learn and heal. Heal? I laugh, a bitter laugh. How can I heal after what I did? The guilt will stay with me forever. I can't just forget that a man died because of a choice I made. It's true, you can't forget, says Dr. Thompson, his voice softer now. But you can learn to live with it. Guilt can be a burden, but it can also be a teacher. Use this to become a better professional in the future. A future? I mutter, the words sounding strange on my lips. What's in the future for me now? I'm a nurse without a license, without courage, without dignity. What do I have to offer? You still have the ability to help others, Maya, Dr. Lisa responds. And this can be done in other capacities. The ethics board can help you find a different path, if you are willing to explore. I look out the window at the busy streets of New York. The sun shines brightly, but I can only see the darkness that nestles inside me. I just wanted to do the right thing, I say, more for myself than for them. I just wanted to help. And you can, but you need to help yourself first, Dr. Thompson finishes, voice firm. We hope you use this time off to reflect and consider what you want for your future in medicine. I get up, legs shaking. The weight of the decision, the mistake, the guilt, all of this still weighs on my shoulders. Thank you, I murmur, my voice barely audible, as I head for the door. As I leave the room, I feel the director's eyes on my back, as if they are evaluating every step I take. The hospital hallway seems longer than ever, each step a reminder of what I lost. Around every corner, I see Mr. Thompson. His image intertwines with my memory. He smiles at me, but his gaze carries the weight of disappointment. The elevator opens and I step in, feeling the heavy air around me. Deafening silence envelopes me as the floor number slowly decreases, until finally, the elevator stops and the doors open onto a world that now seems so far away. Reality hits me like a punch in the stomach. The hospital, which was once my home, now feels like a maze of pain and regret. I walk towards the exit, and, as I pass reception, I see the familiar faces of my colleagues. They exchange furtive glances, whisper among themselves. I feel the weight of judgment, but more than that, I feel like I'm lost. Outside, the sun shines brightly, but I can't feel its heat. The noise of the city, the voices of people, all of this mixes into a distant noise. I sit on a bench on the sidewalk, my head in my hands. What am I going to do now? What is left of me, of my career, of my dream of helping? The cold breeze caresses my face as I close my eyes. The image of Mr. Thompson emerges again, his gentle smile, his his life stories. A man who deserved more than what I offered him. A man who saw me as someone who could make a difference, and in the end, I was the cause of his pain. The weight of guilt is immense, and the truth I feared so much is now an inseparable part of me. As I look at the horizon, I feel like the road ahead is uncertain and full of shadows. The truth may not bring the freedom I hoped for, but maybe, just maybe, it will be the first step towards redemption. Mr. Thompson, I whisper, I'm so sorry. And at this moment, even in the pain, a small part of me begins to understand that the truth, although heavy, is the only path left.